Hello everybody, my name is Alex Strader. I am a Northeast Ohio artist and educator, and for this month's Do the Mew, you'll be creating your very own 3-panel autobiographic comic strip. So you're probably wondering, what kind of tools or materials am I going to need for such a project? Which is an excellent question. First, let's talk about paper. Bristol board is something used by professional cartoonists, illustrators, designers. It's a much thicker paper that holds a lot of ink and other wet media. You can find this at any local art supply store, but if you cannot get a hold of Bristol board, then cardstock is your next best bet. You can find this at any drugstore, you can find it at Target, and we'll be using cardstock for today's example. Next up, we'll have a pencil, obviously, a nice quality eraser, you always want a nice quality one, and a ruler, something with measurements at least, a nice straight edge. Today, I'll be using a blue pencil, and I'll explain why that is as we get to our example. So first, we're going to set up our 3-panel comic strip. That's the boxes that you see in the comics. Usually pros or people like yourself to use rulers or T-squares to set this up. If you want to eyeball it as we're going along, feel free to do that. Sometimes cartoonists do that, but today we'll be using a ruler. First, we're going to center our squares. It'll all make sense as we move along. It sounds confusing at first. So I'm going to put just a 1/2 inch marker on the left and right side of the paper. This is just a 1/2 inch. As you can see, I'm putting little lines, 1/2 inch from the edge. I'm starting from 1 to 1.5. You can do it any way you want. And again, like I said, I'm using a blue pencil. This is a non-photo blue pencil. The reason why I'm using a blue pencil is because if you scan in your work, the blue pencil won't show up in Photoshop, or if you photocopy it, you'll just get crisp black lines rather than the pencil. Now, obviously, you might not have a photo blue pencil, and that's okay. As you can see, I am marking those lines again so I can see them a little better once I create the full line. We're just going to put a lot of lines on this paper. Don't freak out if you're seeing all these lines, because it'll all start making sense. Next, I'm going to kind of map where I'm going to center the 3 panels. That's about at 2.5 by 5 3/4. Again, this is just me using precise numbers. If you want to do your own sizes, feel free to do your own sizes. The size of the actual panels are going to be 3.25. So that's going to be the actual panel size. The first steps I was doing was just centering them. So I'm adding my marks. I already had them on the paper, but totally showing again where they should be. And next, we should be adding our actual lines. So I'm going to line up first with those 1/2 inch lines. And I'm going to go from the bottom to the top. This is just to get us some nice lines in where we can totally see what's going on. Now I'm going to add the bottom and top lines, and you'll see that our rectangle is starting to form. Now I'm going to add my measurements for each panel. I'm going to have a 1/8 space between each panel. So I'm going to go from 3.25 here for the first panel and mark 3.25. And then I'm going to put an 1/8 there. Go over to that 1/8 mark. Go over to 3.25. 3.25. And then 1/8. And now I'm going to add the lines going vertically, that's up and down, to create our panels. Perfect. So now we have our 3 panels, or 3 comic panels, penciled in. Next, we're going to ink them using a ruler or straight edge again. I'm going to be using a black Prismacolor marker, and I'm going to be using the fine pointed edge. Really, you can use any type of inking tool, a Bic pen, in any ink pen you can find at a grocery store, micron pens, again, a brush. We'll talk about inking in a little bit, but here you can tell, or you can see that I am putting little dots on the corner of each panel. This is so I can kind of line the ruler up precisely again, rather than kind of eyeballing it. It'll make sense as you're doing it. I'm going to be using a smaller straight edge or a smaller ruler for this, just so I can do them one at a time. You can use a larger ruler and just go straight across, kind of skipping each dot. It'll make sense once you're looking at it. As you can see, I'm kind of going over to the center one now, going from that dot there to that dot and continuing over. You can do it in any order you want, really. It doesn't really matter. Again, there's plenty of ways of doing this. This is the more cleaner way of doing it. If you want to eyeball it, like I said earlier, you can just draw 3 squares. Sometimes that works out. Perfect. So we have our 3 panels inked and ready to go. I know it can be intimidating, but now let's fill our panels. But first, let's talk about what kind of story we'll be telling with our 3-panel comic strip. Now, you can probably tell from the title of the video, or you can remember from the beginning of this video, that we're going to be making an autobiographic comic. But what does autobiographic mean? If you read a story about Abraham Lincoln, that would be a biography. But if he wrote the story about his life, that would be an autobiography. So a story written by you about yourself would be an autobiography. Now let's take a look at what kind of autobiographic elements I have added to my comic strip. I broke down my short story using different eras from my elementary school experience. I used 1st grade through 5th grade, but really the time frame is really up to how you want to tell your story. It can be something that was 3 seconds, 3 minutes, or even 3 years. Think of it kind of a 3-act play with a beginning, middle, and end. Maybe you want your story to be a memorable day in your life. Maybe it was a day one of your siblings was born, or the day you graduated from kindergarten. Maybe an important event in your life, such as getting your first dog or cat, or meeting a good friend, or a special moment in your life. Maybe you and a friend had an inside joke, or something funny happened during summer break. Definitely don't limit yourself to these ideas. Just use it more as like a jumping off point. Remember, this is your autobiographic comic strip.